Okay, I've been working on the forward bulkhead for a couple days now, and as you can see, I've got it over in my corner of the shop where I can work on it better, and there's plenty of lights and electrical outlets and benches. This is the way I like to do it, and having the jig is nice because I can just cut this off and put it back on where it goes later. If you remember, the bottom of the A post pillars were really rusted on the one side, and this is the right hand side. And you can see here, this is the piece that I cut out. And then I just made this repair by hand. It was pretty tricky, but I just kind of worked around with it. I did some cutting and welding in there. See, that little flange actually gets spot welded to the inner sill, and see how it's just in line with that? Well, that's because a few spot welds go in there as well. And then on the back side here, I had to do a pretty big patch. Here's what was left of that. You can see there's the weld line in there coming through. So this will all get sanded down and sprayed with copious amounts of red oxide. I had to do some repairs over here on the left-hand A pillar as well. Here you can see, you can just kind of barely see there's a weld across there. This had some pitting and all, and that'll all get again sprayed with red oxide. And then you can see there was a repair in here. I think I put a little piece back in here, and then these I put some plug weld pliers on here and doctored them up a little bit and ground them down. So the bottoms of the A pillars are both done now, and I'm going to be able to mate this back up with the floor assembly. But what I need to do before I do that is repair this section here. We took this out. This was all rusted, and I'll form up a new piece, and it's got a channel in it, and it gets spot welded along here. There's also kind of a right angle piece that goes here to kind of support this from wiggling around. That will also get replaced, and we'll spray red oxide in there as well. And then we've got some small broken bolts here. We'll use our little trick to get those out. If you haven't seen that, there's a video in the how-to section. And then we've got that same piece over here, actually both pieces, but then this portion of the scuttle panel is rusted through here. And so we will be making a repair on that for that section. So that is what is coming up next. Time to get on that. Okay, for those of you that don't want to go watch the other video, I have TIG welded this little scrap of 16 gauge, and I didn't get the best weld on this one. There was some contamination because I had a bunch of PB blaster and all that in there. But you can see I have welded this to what was left of the screw, and now I'm just working it out this way. Well, this one up in the corner is going to be tricky because I don't have a lot of clearance there to work with, but we'll get it. All right, we've got all four of those out, and that one in the upper left-hand corner here, over here, that one was real tricky because it was in there deep. But you just have to take your time, and you can see I've welded a piece of steel to here and just kind of worked them out. Now, one of them, that got screwed up, but that's from a little bit of weld, just a tiny little bit up in there. Actually, I think it might be that one there. But anyway, we will chase these threads now and everything will be fine. Moving on. Okay, I got these pieces fabricated and they were tough. I had a couple failed starts with them, but to get these fitting just right, you know, there's no 90-degree angles on here at all. And that other one fits a little better than this one. They originally were spot welded along here, and I had planned to do that, but they require a 3/8 flange, and it seems like that's going to be tough to spot weld. Also, what's left of the original flange is not in the world's greatest shape. And so I think what I'm going to do, see, there's a problem there. I think what I'm going to do is drill out where the original spot welds were and then just go ahead and plug weld them there. And then over here on the edge for this piece, there's tons of lead and all of that. So I might just stitch that right along the edge. We'll have to see. Okay, I've got my patches made and I've got my plug welding holes all drilled, and I have sprayed a ton of red oxide in here to just cover up that surface rust. This is the hole that somebody drove through there with some kind of spike for the antenna. I just left that. Some future restorer 500 years from now can wonder what that was for. And then we come over to the other side. I'm learning to move slow with the camera. There's those holes that I took care of with the stuck screws, machine screws. And here's the other side. These patches were tough to make and get just right, but I think I got them. So I'm going to go ahead and weld these in. All right, the next step here is to get rid of this antenna hole. We know from the shape and the placement that this is a dealer installed antenna. And what's crazy is they must have had it at the same angle as the windshield. They drilled a hole. I don't know if you can get that, but they drilled a hole down through here on an angle through every layer. We're going to leave those holes in the layers, but we're going to smooth this out. And what's great is that I have the perfect tool for this. I bought this years ago to work on bonnets, and it never quite worked out. But look at how this just fits in here perfectly. And I'm going to hammer that out like that. Now, if you look from the side, you'll see that it's very wavy and bumpy. And we will use a straight edge to get this. See, we will make sure this is just right when we get it done. And we'll weld a little patch in there, smooth it down. Everything will be great. For now, it's time to start banging. All right, I've got my patch in. Now, I made the little patch, and then I put, you can see the burned tape in the background. I put tape underneath to just hold the patch while I needed to just tack it. And I have actually used a MIG welder here and a wet rag. That's something you can do at home. A TIG would have been a little more delicate, but it would have put more heat in. And I don't have the ability to really work this area too much. So I'm going to grind down the weld now, and then I will have to do some hammer and dolly work with the slapper and that big spoon I showed you before. So hang on and I'll do that. All right, we're all done, and I'm very happy with it. And you can see that little ghost image of it, which is just so cool. See, that's exactly where that crazy shaped hole was. The weld wire just has a little bit different alloy than the steel around it. But I really went all out with the shrinking disc and the hammer and dolly because I thought, you know what? This is an outside lot car. Let's just do the best we can. So there it is. And once it's painted, it is erased. Pretty happy with that one. Okay, this morning we're going to repair this little back corner of the left-hand side of the bulkhead top panel, also called the scuttle. Now you can see we've got two different kinds of rust here. This rust along here is rusting from the top down. And that is okay. If you can clean it all out, get some epoxy primer in there, you're going to be all right with that. It'll just get filled with a little filler. What is not okay is this. These holes here are rusting from the bottom up. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to show how well that looks. But see, those are craters that are going from the bottom up. And then up here is where they've come through. So every one of these little holes represents a much bigger crater underneath. And so if you have this in an enclosed area, you're not going to be able to just come along and fill it with a little drop from a TIG welder or the MIG or something. You're going to have to replace this. So yesterday afternoon, Brent made up a nice little repair panel for me. And that is right here. And we will go ahead and cut this out and put this in. I thought I might be able to save this drip channel, but I'm not going to be able to. So I will also cut this out and put in a new little drip channel there. Now, in addition, when this car was dissected somewhere else, they didn't quite do that right. You can see they've cut down through 2 layers. You want to be real careful about that. And they have cut off the flange for the scuttle to meet the bulkhead side panel. And then see, also, that flange is supposed to ride up on here. So, see, this is supposed to be up there, like that. So, I will also come along, weld up this cut seam. This is an internal structural piece that's folded over. And then I will weld that flange back onto this piece so that this is all good to go. Oddly enough, when the cars are put together, the flange of this scuttle is not spot welded to this. You would think it would be, but it's not. This is done all as part of the internal structure, and then the car is skinned later, and so they actually don't spot weld this. So you've got a flange on the bottom of the scuttle, and then you've got a flange on the top of the bulkhead side panel. They hook together, and then they're just stitched across because that's the last panel to go on the car. And then they lead this seam. So let's go ahead and start making those repairs. Well, now we've got that piece cut out. And as you can see, there is no factory priming of any kind under there. So we will scuff that all down and put some red oxide on it before we put our top patch in. But I did decide to go ahead and cut out the drip channel. It's going to be easier and better to replace it than try to salvage what was there. So now we will fit the new pieces. Okay, I've got my piece all formed up. Looks a little bumpy there right here because I tried to soften that edge up. This factory edge was a little softer than our piece, so I messed around with that, and that'll just get sanded down a little bit. But I've got a little gap here. It looks a little wide, but I know everything's going to shrink up, so that's okay. So I'm real happy about how this is fitting. And where's my straight edge? All right, here's my straight edge here. Let's see that it's pretty much straight, nice and straight back that way. That's important. So now I'm going to go ahead and tack it in place and then double and triple check everything, and then I'll do the final welding for it. Okay, it's been tacked in place. We are going to use the MIG and the wet rag again. This is exactly how you guys can do it at home. Although, if you called me to make this piece for you, I would recommend doing a stepped edge underneath here, because it's very tricky to do that butt weld with a MIG. You know, again, we could use a TIG here, but it's going to put more heat in. I have more hammer and dolly and planishing work to do, and I can't really reach under here too well. So we're going to keep that heat way down with a wet rag and just do little bits at a time. All right, now we are welded up. And you can see on this seam where it's blackened the weld by slapping it with a wet rag, but it has really controlled the expansion of heat. See over here on these 4 plug welds I put in to take the place of the spot welds. You can see where the heat's coming out a lot more in those. And then down here on the end, I put a little stitch weld in. They actually had a little brazing there originally, and that's very common. So I'm now gonna dress this down, probably do a little hammer and dolly work there by that seam weld. We'll get that all fixed up, and then I will weld in a new drip channel down here. But before I do that, there's still a little lead in this corner, and there's a couple little pinholes. So I will melt that lead out and take care of them as well. So that's next. Okay, it's welded up and it's dressed down. I've done some hammer and dolly work and sanded across there, and it's really, really good. It's straight. It's just shallow, maybe a couple thousandths of an inch across here, which is good. Let me see if I can show you. Look at that. It's just where we want it to be. Now you will notice up by the windshield, I didn't quite get it, and that's because I can't get under there very well. I messed around with it as much as I could. But this is an example of where if you get greedy up in there, you're going to ruin the whole thing. So this is a great repair right now. This car will undoubtedly get a whole coat of sandable primer, probably even a couple coats. And so we are just going to leave this alone as it is and finish up that drip channel. All right, we're flipped upside down now, and you can see that I have now welded in the drip channel that was missing. So that's all taken care of. I've ground it down on this side, and I've still got some dressing up to do with a Dremel tool inside of there. That's okay. You can see the back side of our little weld right there. And we've put the red oxide in there and some weld-through primer. And now we're going to go ahead and put this piece on right there like that. You can see where on this wall here, there's a bunch of layers, and then they just kept spot welding them together, and then they leaded over this with a lot of lead. And then here, we would be able to get in here with the big spot welder, but I can't get that in this area of the shop, and I just decided to keep things going. I'm just going to plug weld this seam here, and then I'll grind that down. And then over here on the end, there's a couple funny little pieces that Brent is over there working on right now. There he is. And they all kind of look like an afterthought, and they're a little bit different on a 61 like this. So that'll be next. All right. This side is finally done. You can see I've closed off this end. Like I said, I know all these little pieces look like afterthoughts, but this is exactly how it is. That piece right there with that little, that little extension there. I don't know why they do it that way, but all the 3/8 are that way. So that's it. This side is all done, and there's still some dressing down to do with some plug welds. You can see a little burn through there on that piece that's the bottom of the windshield post, but there was a lot of repair to do over here. And it's an area you never really see, but it's got to be done right, and everything's got to be in the right spot, or the door won't shut, the windshield won't be right, the seals won't fit. So that's as far as we are so far.